Eli Lilly against Mochi in court in San Francisco. Our friend Sabina was there. And as promised on the podcast this past week, we've got Sabina here to talk about what she witnessed in that courtroom. Now, I had the ability to join her on a live panel on TikTok yesterday, alongside some friends that you may know. The Downsize, Christopher from the Downsize was there. Our friend Lee Fits In, who covers a lot of the legal stuff here, and Maria from Terzepatide Tales. We all just kind of waited with bated breath for what Sabina had to say, and then kind of devoured her information together. Wanted to bring you that same thing over here on YouTube today. And so, fresh off a full day of travel, Sabina has given us a little bit of time here. We'll try to be respectful of that, but I'd like to welcome in Sabina from GLP Winners. Sabina, hey, how are you?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk more about this.
Oh, I'm excited too, but I just feel bad because you just got done traveling, and I know that can be exhausting.
Yeah, but it'll be fine. I'm ready to nerd out on the case, honestly.
Awesome. It feels good to be home too, I bet. Like, I know when I get back home from traveling, it just kind of a sigh of relief to be back in your place.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you made the decision to go out and be part of this lawsuit. We kind of teed it up on the podcast. You wanted to see what happened here, especially as it relates to like the body language and some of the things that don't get picked up in just a simple court filing, which is basically what we're used to following. How did that pay off for you? Was it worth being there? Do you think that you were able to extrapolate some information that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to?
Absolutely. First of all, I don't even know if the transcript is out or will come out.
I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard if it will come out. Like, perhaps it is available, but so in my mind, there's a ton of information I got that we otherwise wouldn't have. And luckily, the judge was very expressive. Mm-hmm. Like when a lawyer was talking, and because there were 3 cases before this, or 4 cases before this, when a lawyer was talking and she didn't like what they were saying, you could tell that she was about to say something in response. So that was great. She was extremely expressive.
Awesome. So on that topic, you know, one of the first things that you said when you came out of the courtroom, I think was a text to Lee, and you said something like, this was embarrassing for Eli Lilly. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I would say, approximately 90% of the time, and it was 2 hours, maybe more, that we spent on this case, was the judge berating Eli Lilly for either not having good enough evidence or not having concrete injuries. Mm-hmm. So because it's a federal court case, my understanding is that you can't just sue someone and then be like, okay, let's do discovery and like, let's show me under the covers, right? Yeah. And so a lot of the evidence that Eli Lilly had was like Reddit posts. And they had all these claims and all these like vague, their marketing is misleading type of claims, but they didn't have evidence that consumers were actually being misled. So like, did anyone actually go to Mochi's website and then buy their medication thinking they were actually getting Mounjaro or Zepbound? And the judge was not convinced that there was evidence that was the case, which was what would be needed to open discovery, which Eli Lilly was eager for, right? All they want to do is like get into the details and dig in and find the dirt on Mochi.
Right. So yesterday, we were talking about this for like a good, couple of hours, it seemed like. Mm-hmm. One of my takeaway and kind of what I put together in a tweet was that the judge's sentiment in that case was that Lilly didn't substantiate any damages, and that they should take all their frustrations about compound enforcement up with the FDA or legislators, and that Lilly's going to have a chance to resubmit this case. Is that, you feel like that's a fair encapsulation of?
Yeah, she's giving a chance to amend their current case, right? Yeah. And so I'm not a lawyer, so I might not know the process here, but I think they could, what they did with Empower is they withdrew the case and they resubmitted it in a more favorable court. Right. I don't know if that's on the table for them to do here. I guess they could do that, but the judge is allowing them to amend it. But she basically made it extremely clear it wasn't where it would need to be in its current state, mostly on the harm claims and the actual evidence that would allow discovery to happen and depositions of Mochi and all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So perhaps maybe we'll see it refiled somewhere else, and we won't see a dismissal in this one particularly, although it seemed to be the way that this judge was leaning, right? It was to just
if I had to bet, I would bet that she would dismiss it unless Lilly came up with way better evidence. And to be honest, they had Reddit quotes, but I don't think the Reddit quotes were even the best Reddit quotes they could have found. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that I think you said in regards to the Reddit stuff is that the judge was really sort of calling that into question. Like, this is what you have. You have Reddit posts, so essentially you have nothing. I think what you said, that at one point the judge actually asked, did you talk to any of these people on Reddit, or is it just screenshots?
Yeah, they asked, which honestly I agree with, because I know a random Reddit post may or may not be an actual patient, may or may not have complete information, and people will post things with incorrect information all the time. Yeah. And so it's like, did you actually speak to them? Are they going, like, to me, a Reddit post is not enough. If you have the actual Reddit come forward and they're like, hey, I'm a Mochi patient, this was my experience, that's different, but that's not what they had.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it kind of like it's a thread, but you have to pull at that thread, right? Mm-hmm. Because there could be all sorts of people with all sorts of agendas posting all sorts of things in Reddit, and there are. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously that was never going to be taken seriously in a court of law. And so sort of to be expected. You know, one of the things that I'm curious, so obviously this went the way of Mochi. Mochi has to be pretty thrilled with the outcome. And I think a lot of people, I mean, I think there are some people that are surprised by the judge's response. But I mean, at the end of the day, we kind of saw what Lilly was alleging here and kind of went, you know, is the Reddit stuff, is this real? Is this, I mean, it seemed, the whole lawsuit seemed from the get-go a little bit more vindictive than it did something that had actual legal merit.
Yeah. I mean, some people have speculated it feels personal because they dug up, you know, dirt. What they thought was dirt on the founder of Mochi. Mm-hmm. It felt like there was a lot more going on than some of the other lawsuits from Lilly. And I mean, in the initial lawsuit, they have an entire section called harms. Mm-hmm. And the judge literally was like, let's talk about the section because I'm not seeing enough actual direct tangible harm to Eli Lilly that is substantiated and that is directly tied to it.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think by the time people watch this video, I think they will have pretty well unpacked that this went in favor of Mochi. So I don't want to belabor a ton of stuff that you've already covered or other people have already covered. But here's what I'm interested to know from Sabina, GLP winner Sabina, who's very tied into this industry. You're very tied into compound. Today, there was a bunch of stuff on Twitter about BPI and their manufacturing of mass manufacturing of personalized doses of medication. What does this mean for compounds? Is this sort of a positive thing for compounds? Is it somehow a negative thing for compounds, or is it a neutral thing?
I think it's positive to neutral. So first of all, the cases aren't over and there's a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. I do think Mochi had more things going on, meaning it was not like a simple cut and dry, we don't like how you're marketing things. There was a lot more in that case. So it seems like if one of those things could have stuck, this was one of the first cases that was also being heard. And once decisions get made, federal judges don't necessarily like to overturn each other unless there's a really good argument or reason for doing so. So if this case gets dismissed, then it sets a precedent for all of the other cases that are currently in play, and also Novo Nordisk's cases, which tend to be a lot more simple. Novo Nordisk cases are very simple. Like Eli Lilly, when they sue someone, often it's because they're doing something kind of weird, and like maybe you or I might look at it and you're like, yeah, I can see the arguments there. Now, does Eli Lilly have enough facts to back it up? Does Eli Lilly have enough harms? Maybe not, but they're creative cases. Mm-hmm. Novo Nordisk cases tend to be very basic. Like I read their lawsuit against Amble, and honestly, I think Amble's marketing is kind of unremarkable, meaning I don't think they're doing anything particularly sketchy. I don't think they're doing anything weird, like saying that you're getting Ozempic or anything like that. So I think it's very telling for Novo Nordisk's cases. And in this case, the judge had read Eli Lilly's other cases. Was comparing what they put in the Mochi case to what they put in their other cases. And they had slightly more direct harms in the other cases than they had spelled out in Mochi. But even then, it didn't feel like she was buying any of it.
One of the main things that you brought up when we talked on the podcast the other day was like, essentially, and you laid it out perfectly. I was trying to think of this thought the other day when we were on live, and then it came to me later on. One of the main things that you were pointing out before the case was that this is a private company seeking to essentially force enforcement of existing laws or regulations onto another private company. Now, in that sense, based upon the way that the judge responded, which I think that there were things that the judge said that led you to believe that that was the exact track that she was taking too, correct?
Yeah, because I mean, anytime Lilly complained about customization, she was like, show me concrete harms, right? And they were like, well, they shouldn't be customizing their drug. And it's like, that's a compounding pharmacy issue, right? That's a 503 issue. So when we talk about this being positive for compounding, we have to keep in mind that the Mochi case is primarily, granted, there is a party that is a compounding pharmacy, but it's primarily a telehealth company that is being sued by Eli Lilly. There's separate litigation for compounding pharmacies, and that's a different discussion. But basically, if you don't like that they're making the medication, go to the FDA or go to Congress and change the law, right? Yeah. Because compounding pharmacies, while they're licensed on a state level and the individual compounding pharmacy will get inspected by state inspectors, what people can compound and not compound is regulated by the FDA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the judges essentially like take it up with them. So in that sense, based upon the fact that the judge in this trial did read it that way, and the judge, the point that you made about federal judges not liking to overturn something that another, and granted, there's been no ruling here, so we're not to that point yet where another judge couldn't do something else and go against the judge's opinion, especially if they just withdraw their case and move it somewhere else. But do you think that this is an empowering thing for compounders? And I use that term loosely. It could mean compound pharmacies. It could mean telehealth companies. It could mean the provider groups that help them out. I mean, it could mean a lot of things, but do you think this is sort of an empowering move that will embolden them to continue to promote and advertise compounding?
Yes, especially because so they went through a few Mochi advertisements that were in the actual lawsuit. And one of the things that really stood out to me and was surprising to me, particularly because Novo likes to litigate on this, is citing pharma research studies or clinical trials or whatever, and relaying it to the active ingredient of tirzepatide. The judge had no issue with that. And I was really surprised by that, because that seemed to be a sticking point for a lot of people, or a line that a lot of people learn, well, don't cross this line. But the judge did not care at all that Mochi was doing that. She literally was like, it's the same active ingredient.
Yeah. And this was an interesting part for me to hear you say yesterday, because I'm not certain who the enforcer is on this, but it was my understanding prior to yesterday that the law does not allow for compounded versions of any drug to cite FDA regulated and sanctioned trials that are used for the approval of a medication, because compounded versions are intrinsically not FDA approved, and for that reason they cannot cite these studies. But again, that might just be an enforcement thing, right? Where this judge is going, if you have a problem with that, that isn't my business. That's the FDA's business, or the FTC. I don't know who the regulating body is on that, but it was was that your understanding too? I can't remember what you said yesterday.
First, I'll say the judge commented on this in the context of Mochi's advertisements, and Mochi was reasonably cautious in their advertisements. Like, they were like, this is the active ingredient. Our compounded medication has the same active ingredient, right? And they also clearly put a disclaimer that says compounded medication is not FDA approved. And that is not changed by this judge making a comment on it. So my understanding is that if there was enforcement, or if there was guidance on what was appropriate or not, it would come from the FDA. But in the federal court for this situation, the judge didn't see an issue with it.
Okay, here's a nerdy thing that I get so excited to talk to you because most people wouldn't even like go down these rabbit holes. But okay, let's talk about like the Novo cases real quick because okay, one of the things that I've noticed, I listen to a lot of Sirius XM radio, a lot of sports stuff, and a lot of times Hims and Hers Health does advertisements on there. And one of the things that they explicitly do say in their advertisements about semaglutide is it's the same active ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy. And I find that to be an interesting statement because again, not a biochemist. I don't understand how all of this works, but the one thing I do know to be true about the semaglutide that was used in the FDA clinical trials versus or I should say, the version of semaglutide that is made and sold by Novo Nordisk versus the kind that is made and sold by compound pharmacies, these two versions of semaglutide are manufactured differently. In some cases, I don't know about all cases. I don't know that anybody knows because that's a big question that I feel sort of looms over the topic of compounds is the source API. But if you can set that aside for a minute and just agree that some of the compounded versions of semaglutide are made from a chemical process and not this recombinant yeast-based process. Do you feel like then in a similar argument in court that Novo Nordisk may take against a telehealth company or a compound pharmacy, that they may actually have more of a leg to stand on in that part of the argument or no?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure, honestly, because I haven't heard the same distinctions about tirzepatide. I don't know if that's because it's not valid or not, that tirzepatide is made in a different way. And Novo likes to mention the yeast process for semaglutide. That's a really good question. My understanding is that, from a chemistry standpoint, the outcome is the same, but I hear a lot of people say that the process is different and then that makes something different.
And I would add as color to that conversation, I have read recently, I couldn't cite you the exact thing. It might be in an article that I've done on Substack. I'd have to go back through. But anyways, recently the FDA did put out guidance on compound GLP-1 specifically, and they did cite salt forms of semaglutide. And like, I don't know how that all plays in it, but it specifically cited semaglutide and certain compound versions as never being acceptable. So I'm curious about that because I don't know if like your casual GLP-1 user understands this, but still today there is far more compounded semaglutide out there than there is tirzepatide. Obviously that's changing every day. I think, just like the market is for the branded kind, but generally speaking, it's mostly compound semaglutide that is out there. I am just super curious how that plays out in a court of law. And to your point about how Novo cites that a lot, I do know for a fact that Eli Lilly's tirzepatide is made from a chemical process. So it's kind of funny to me because you have one pharmaceutical company, Novo Nordisk, taking this track in these lawsuits that compounded versions of our drug are intrinsically unsafe because they're made from a chemical process and not a yeast process. Where over here you have Eli Lilly who makes a peptide version of their drug that is made from a chemical synthesizing process. So it's like if chemically synthesized semaglutide is intrinsically unsafe, but chemically synthesized tirzepatide isn't. I just think it's funny because I feel like those are probably at competing odds against each other and probably shoots a hole in Novo's case. But again, not a scientist any more than I am an endocrinologist.
If we have some biochemists in the comments, please let us know if you know, because I'm genuinely curious, and I feel like I can probably find out in the next 2 weeks. Now you've made me curious.
Yeah, I'm super curious to know the answer to that. And I think to the point that we had in our conversation yesterday, I mean, I think one of the things that also was coming up, and maybe you can enlighten us on exactly what the judge said about this specific topic, but I think the judge was also calling into question the Lilly lawyers bringing up the lack of safety of compounded versions of tirzepatide. Do you remember what she said about that?
So basically, it came up when they were talking about marketing. And in Lilly's lawsuit, they basically say if consumers try a compounded tirzepatide product and they don't get results, then that damages Lilly's brand, right? That was the claim that Lilly had. And the judge started out being like, what is that based upon? Right? Like, where are you seeing this actually damaging it? And also, like, where's the evidence that people are failing to achieve the results? Because, like, you look and there's a lot of people who lost a lot of weight in the last couple of years and they haven't touched a Lilly product.
Yeah.
And then they kind of responded, well, you know, Akita Pharmacy failed a bunch of safety protocols. And the judge was immediately like, what specific safety protocols? And they didn't have an answer. Right. And like,
which is astounding to me that lawyers from a nearly $1 trillion company have not armed themselves with that information going into this trial. Like, if you're going to say publicly for a year and a half that compounded versions are intrinsically unsafe for patients, and that this, and even in their most recent earnings call, the CEO of Eli Lilly doubled down on previous comments that compounds aren't hurting their bottom line. Those are the words of Dave Ricks, not Dave Knapp. He said, they're not hurting our bottom line. We're really concerned about patient safety. So if you're going to be harping on this for almost 2 years and send your attorneys into a lawsuit where you're specifically going to bring that up and not have that information, to me seems like somebody should probably lose their job.
Well, I think it's an interesting push and pull because Novo and Lilly are both publicly traded companies. And if they say compounding is undermining them, their stock goes down, which they don't want.
Right.
But if they don't say that compounding is undermining them, they don't win these lawsuits. And that's bad for them too. Right. What's interesting. So then we went to the safety protocols at Akita. They didn't have any details on the safety protocols. And then the judge followed up and basically asked, what did the lapse in these safety protocols actually do to the medications? Like, what are the actual harms that patients from Akita Pharmacy had? And they didn't have anything either. And then
have you and I spoken offline about, I don't want to get into the specifics of this, but have you and I spoken offline about the rumors around? Okay. All right. I didn't know if we had talked about that or not, but suffice it to say, there are rumors about what has happened. And I am curious if there's resolution, if that is a thing, and if there is resolution to that, if ultimately that comes into play in some way in all of this, but I don't want to get into that, obviously.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Eli Lilly, you would think they would have, if there was good evidence of harms to patients from Akita Pharmacy, they would have something, right? And then they backed up to Reddit posts, and then she was like, that doesn't come close to evidence. And then she said, this claim is not supportive. That's all you're relying upon. And then they said, well, the FDA said it was subpar. And the judge is like, I don't buy that compensation is subpar because it was good enough during the shortage.
Yeah. Where did the FDA say that compound tirzepatide is?
Yeah, she literally waved her hand when she was like, don't give me that. The FDA thought it was good enough during the shortage.
You know, I got to say, just from a human perspective, it's very impressive to me that a judge or an attorney, for that matter, not necessarily the Lilly attorneys, but anybody who has to get up to speed on this stuff, would get into the granular detail of that stuff to be able to dismiss a silly comment like that. And did she bring up it was good enough during the shortage, or is that you saying that?
You brought it up. No, the judge said. That's what the judge said. She said the judge said that it was like the FDA thought it was safe during the shortage. Like, why would that have changed? And so, like, credit to the judge for doing her homework, and credit to her clerks for also doing the homework, I assume, because she seemed pretty well informed and prepared for this case. And she knew very intuitively, like, some of the things that stood out, like, Lilly said that they were steering patients to compounded medication, and that was stealing customers from Lilly. And so there's like kind of two things on that. First of all, it's prescription medication, right? It's not up to us, the patients, what medication we get. Ultimately, it has to be signed off by a doctor. So a doctor is in the loop. So
regardless of what the medical pundits say online about telehealth companies that they don't own, it's not like you can go to these websites and just hand pick a drug and get it. You're still going to have even if it's an asynchronous visit, you're going to have your information double checked, gone over. You're still going to have communication on the back end back from the medical provider. it's not like you're just going online and buying something off of Amazon. It's not that simple.
Yeah, they like every company has their own vetting process and follow-up questions. And oftentimes you have to put in all your medications, your full medical record before they'll even consider if you're potentially a candidate.
And most of them legions of attorneys that are on the back end signing off on this stuff to make sure that it's all copacetic with the law.
Yeah. With all that said, I will say if you qualify for one medication, you generally will qualify for the other. But there's a lot of reasons why you might want one or the other, depending on your specific situation and what your doctor knows.
And ultimately, that just goes back to the proper FDA indications, right? I mean, what these drugs are approved for and what the criteria that you have to meet in order to be approved for the medications are, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I imagine that some companies do a better job of that than others. I'm not trying to say that they're all created equal, but generally they're all sort of working from the same script. I mean, it's in terms of how a patient would qualify for these medications. Some of them are different and maybe have a little bit different approach, but
I mean, some of them do microdosing and then they have slightly different requirements because a lot of people take this medication for non-weight loss reasons and get a lot of benefit. I'm married to someone with fibromyalgia who takes semaglutide at a low dose, never needed to lose weight ever, and gets profound benefit from these medications. So everybody has their own medical reasons for wanting to potentially off-label use these medications.
Yeah, and which I just personally fully support. People and their doctors ought to be able to make medical decisions for themselves. But I get a kick out of the medical people that are out there pontificating that also own or at least have a financial interest in their own telehealth companies, and it's like only we do it the right way. But it's like, how many people are you denying these medications compared to any other place online? Probably not very much, because everybody's essentially fitting about the same criteria. Again, unless somebody's choosing to microdose, which more power to them. I mean, I think that anybody who knows the science behind this, you don't have to be a medical doctor to understand that these probably have profound benefits to a lot of patient populations that aren't necessarily obese. I mean, I've heard from a lot of the same doctors, tongue in cheek, that have a lot of negative things to say about telehealth, that they're also kind of casually saying this stuff should be in the water. Well, which is it? You know, I mean, I think people that use it and have seen that benefit would go amen, but then, be awfully confused when they read about patients getting access to these medications through telehealth. I don't know. The whole thing is.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a JAMA study that showed that 47% of the US was a good candidate for these medications. Right. And so when 47% of the US is a good candidate, shouldn't we give it away like candy within reason?
Yeah. I mean, that's what they did with fluoride, right? I mean, they literally put it in the water because fluoride's good for your teeth. So we're going to put it in the water. I mean, anyways, this conversation could digress a lot, and we could talk a lot about this other stuff. What are some of the other things that you personally, especially given your position in the industry as sort of an insider, because nobody in the industry probably has a better beat on what telehealth companies are doing, where compounds are coming from, how this big picture works and how it all comes together than you, Sabina. So what stood out the most to you yesterday?
Well, okay. So there's some other things the judge said that I really agreed with and liked and showed that she did her homework. So first of all, because I make a tool called GLP Winner, like I literally study marketing for telehealth companies and try to make it comparable and actionable, because we're a tool that helps you compare telehealth companies in the space, right? She was not convinced that patients that were going to Mochi's compound would have been Eli Lilly patients simply because of the price point. Right. And we got into a little spat over some Mochi marketing that said best weight loss treatment. And first of all, she was like, it's treatment, not medication. Right. And there's this distinction between the best medication, or we also talked about customized medication, and best treatment or customized treatment. Mm-hmm. Treatment is the practice of medicine. It includes everything your doctor might do, conversations you have with your doctor, visiting a dietitian, other support and like clinical care that you might receive as part of that process of treating obesity or weight loss or whatever you have going on.
And Mochi has positioned itself, just from the scores of ads that I see online, has positioned itself as sort of holistic, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
so I've been a Mochi
multifaceted.
patient. Yeah, I've been a Mochi patient because I change providers every month, and they offer a dietitian. They have video calls with the provider, and I had like a great, probably 20-minute video call. It was very thorough. They asked a bunch of questions. They were really receptive to answering as many questions as I wanted answered. It was definitely medical care. It wasn't just like less than that, right? It wasn't like they didn't ask my medical history.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because when they got into the details on the marketing on best weight loss treatment, Eli Lilly was like, well, we're the best weight loss treatment, right? And they said best means most effective or most studied, which like I've never heard anyone be most studied, because tirzepatide is not the most studied. Semaglutide is definitely more studied than tirzepatide because it's been out longer.
Or even at this point, most of the studies that come out, even going back to exenatide, there's a lot of studies that are still coming out. It depends on what you define as a study, whether it's an FDA trial for an indication or whether it's just a post-marketing study or whatever. There's been a lot done on exenatide and liraglutide for that matter.
Yeah, and straight up the judge said, what if it's the best treatment is the only what if it's the only treatment they can afford, it is the best. Right?
The judge said that?
Like that's a possibility for some people, right?
Did the judge say that?
Yes. The best weight loss treatment for somebody might be the best treatment they can afford.
Wow.
Right?
Did she watch our TikToks?
I know. She was engaged on the issues, right?
It's amazing.
She was very aware of the fact that if insurance did not cover Mounjaro Zepbound, that many people could not afford Mounjaro Zepbound. Mm-hmm. She was keenly aware. She brought it up several times. She, at one point, I think to try to humiliate Lilly's lawyers, asked them, if my insurance doesn't cover it, how much does it cost? And he didn't have an answer he was confident at. He gave an answer, I think $400, but he was like, but I'm not confident. And it's like, why are you not confident?
Wait a minute. The judge asked the lawyers from Eli Lilly, again, a nearly $1 trillion company, how much their treatment is without insurance, and they didn't have a clear answer. $349 a month for 2.5 milligram vials and $499 for the other doses. They couldn't even come up with that.
No. And like, of course I'm sitting in the audience like, hello.
Yeah. You're like grabbing onto your chair, trying not to stand up.
Yes. Because all I do is like try to do price transparency on these medications, because to be honest, like, yes, you need a doctor to prescribe them and need to be a good fit. But like for a lot of people, they need to budget around the cost of these medications, even if it's compounding. Compounding is still extremely expensive.
Yeah, it's not cheap, especially when you get into, and I think this is what you try to get to the bottom of for people, the platform fee, right? Mm-hmm. Because the medicine cost is one point, the platform fee is another. And again, they all kind of move in herds in terms of how they market all that. But the term I like to use is they all like to cross the street at the same time. It's like one company does this and the other one's like, oh, me too. Like, and at least for the smaller ones. Yeah. And you keep a good tabs on that, like it brings up another point too. And I know I keep cutting you off because this is my ADD and I have untreated ADD. But one of the things that it brings up is like the other thing you brought up in the podcast the other day was you're like, this corporate practice of medicine. And I was like, what is that? And I think you defined it pretty well in terms of basically like a corporation sort of steering medical treatment one way or the other instead of letting the doctor do that. Right. Do I have that?
Yeah, from a high level, that's what corporate practice of medicine is. It can also be like outside pressure on a doctor to prescribe certain ways, or practice medicine in certain ways.
And so obviously, we touched on this in the podcast the other day too. Like Lilly Direct has been accused of doing just that, right? By legislators. Like I know it's being looked at in Congress for this reason. I can't remember who the senators were, maybe Durbin. But a couple of them were like, hey, this Lilly Direct thing, which I don't like, because I think Lilly Direct, NovoCare, Pfizer dropped their own. Like, I think those are on balance, like a positive thing, because it's the only way to get PBMs out of the way without legislation. So anything that gets PBMs out of the way, I feel like is probably a positive, though I don't love pharmaceutical companies getting into the prescribing. I don't like pharmaceutical companies getting into the pharmacy game. Like those are all valid concerns, but it's also like the PBM thing is such a problem that it's like, I'm willing to, so we'll take something over nothing for now until we can get meaningful PBM reform, #PBM reform. But that's basically what Lilly's being accused of with Lilly Direct, is they partnered with these telehealth companies, and these Congress people are saying, hey, how are they not just steering people to your Zepbound, right?
Yeah. And I brought it up because I'm less familiar with the federal Congress people, but like the state of Texas, just like maybe 2 weeks ago, filed a lawsuit against Eli Lilly for these issues. So they cover, and I brought up, so they covered, Lilly has like a free nurse program where, they will go and educate doctors about Lilly drugs. They'll also do calls with patients. They'll be like, hey, do you need us to teach you how to do your injection? They'll also do follow-up calls to talk to patients about their side effects. So it's kind of medical care, right?
I feel like there was something in there too about them assisting in prior authorizations.
Yes, I have very strong opinions on this. So prior authorizations are a huge financial burden on doctors' offices. They have to staff for people who just specialize in prior authorizations. And I will say, this isn't in defense of what Lilly's doing, but nothing Lilly is doing is atypical for a specialty pharmacy that has a very expensive medication. But without prior authorization assistance, less people will be on the medication. And I don't like that. But at the same time, they shouldn't need to offer that service, right? It's a symptom of a broken healthcare system.
Yeah.
The pharma company is subsidizing doctors by offering that program.
And I've actually heard people kind of banter back and forth on that Lilly may just have not like been aware of what they're doing, because they're getting into this pharmacy game and they're not a pharmacy company. And there's a lot of, I mean, I know that sounds like, oh, you're just, letting a $1 trillion company off the hook. I'm not, but I think it's like, it is the human element of this. Like, these companies are imperfect. Lilly specifically, I think, is kind of known in the industry for like a good lack of internal communication. And so, it is sort of astounding to think that, like, to bring this back to what we're talking about here, that they're accusing Mochi of steering patients towards a medication when they literally own an entire platform that's designed to increase access to their medication. It isn't as if they've struck these deals with these telehealth companies with the expectation that they're going to prescribe an equal amount of Wegovy to Zepbound. It's just not the case.
2 quick things on this related to the case. Very early on, the judge basically said something like, hey, if Mochi went out of business, Eli Lilly would lose money because they're writing prescriptions for Eli Lilly drugs, right? And at one point, we also went through an Instagram video ad. And at the beginning of the ad, I think it has Myra in it, but I did not double check it. They literally talk about how she says, the first thing we do is we check if your insurance covers it, right? And then if they don't, then you have a conversation with your doctor about alternative treatments. And sure, that includes compounded, but it also includes other anti-obesity medications.
Yeah, Contrave or whatever.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. That she felt like the judge felt like Mochi must be prescribing some amount of Lilly's medications. Eli Lilly asserted at one point that they thought Mochi was prescribing literally 0.
That's what their attorneys thought?
That's what Eli Lilly's attorneys asserted. And they were like, we need to get in discovery. We need to see if Mochi's actually prescribing Mounjaro as Zepbound. And Mochi's lawyer responded and was like, hey, that doesn't make sense. Eli Lilly is a drug manufacturer. They have all the data on how much of their medication they're selling. We don't have that data. They should be experts in their own data, which I think is like funny, because the compounding pharmacy OFAs versus FDA lawsuit, the FDA was like, well, Lilly should know their data is the best data for what's happening with Zepbound and Mounjaro, period. That's what the FDA said. So it feels like almost like this judge was having them eat their words by saying like, yeah, and the judge agreed with Mochi's argument. She was like, yeah, you should have the best data. I agree with that. I don't think that that's grounds for discovery on Mochi to prove exactly how many Mounjaro Zepbound prescriptions they're writing.
Right. It probably tracks right along with however many people are covered under their insurance. If you looked at the national averages of health plans that cover anti-obesity medications, my sense is that it would track right along with that, because who's going to pay $300, $200, whatever dollars a month for a compound if they can pay $25 with their copay for the branded?
Yeah.
And that's
the cheapest way to get this medication is to have great insurance, everyone.
exactly. And I think like that's always what I go back to when I talk to industry people or pharma people. I'm like, if people had coverage, there would be no market for compound, very little market for compound, because I think people are smart enough to know that this isn't some altruistic thing where the compounders are coming to the rescue out of the goodness of their hearts. They're trying to make money too. It's just that they exist in a competitive market, and Lilly and Novo don't, which is what they're trying to defend, is the basically competition that they have against compounds. Right. But the only reason the compounds are there is because A, their prescriptions are too expensive for the average person, and B, insurance companies won't cover them.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I know the stats offhand. This is like a 1.5 year old data. It's an IQVIA report. But for Mounjaro and Ozempic, if you have diabetes, your insurance 75% of the time will cover it. For weight loss, for Zepbound and Wegovy, 75% of the time your insurance will not cover it. So roughly 25% of people have coverage for weight loss. And if you look at non-employer plans, ACA plans, that's Obamacare from the marketplace, 1% of those cover it. I will tell you, because I'm a business owner, and we just shop for insurance for one company, and I'm currently shopping for insurance for another company. I need to do that later today, is finalize that. I can't even find a plan that will cover these medications.
I hear that so often, because for so long, sort of what we were told by pharma people, what we were told by insurance people, is that your employer has to opt into this. It's your employer's choice. And the more I hear from employers, the more I'm hearing there's not even a choice. Or if there is a choice, it's so cost prohibitive that it's not a realistic option.
Yeah. Well, I think, if you're at a very, very large company, like you have thousands and thousands of employees that are all on health insurance, then you have a lot more power, right? You can spread the cost. But it's still, to be honest, if you look at the data last year, claims data for these prescriptions alone, GLP-1 prescriptions, with 10% of prescription spend. 10% of prescription spend in the United States from insurance. They're just egregiously expensive. And if we had everyone on the medication covered by insurance that is a good candidate for the drug, or even less than that, it would be bigger than our current entire nationwide spend on prescriptions.
Wow.
So we can say that insurance should cover it, because they should, but if insurance covered it, it would increase plans of health insurance for absolutely everyone. And that would mean that some people here wouldn't have health insurance, and that's bad too.
Yeah. And the other thing that we've sort of been told is that it's going to get better. More insurance plans will pick up the cost of this. That's not what appears to be happening. It appears to me to be going the opposite direction. Just this past week, TRICARE. So if you're under, the Department of Defense, if you're under like a military plan, like the major plans that are available under TRICARE just dropped GLP-1s. And so, you're talking about tens of thousands of additional people who now, were on these medications the branded versions that won't be able to. I mean, and then you look at the deals like CVS Caremark struck with Novo Nordisk to push people off of Zepbound and onto Wegovy. It doesn't seem to be getting better. And so I tend to not buy into this notion that time will sort of heal all wounds when it comes to access to obesity medicine. It's going to have to take major legislation or a major price drop by the pharmaceutical companies to get it to happen.
Yeah. Well, here's my concern with time. So I think time will, if there's competition from other medications, and you pay more attention to the pipeline than me, right? The problem that we're running into slowly but surely is a lot of the competition is getting, like you did a piece on Viking getting acquired by Lilly, right? Novo and Lilly are going to try to continue their duopoly as long as they can, right? Because that lets them to continue to set the very high price.
Yeah, they're like, if we can replicate what we did with insulin, we're in great shape.
Yeah.
Because they've always had this unspoken handshake, which there's been litigation that they've lost on that very thing, price fixing of insulin, which involved Lilly and Novo. Am I correct on that? I think I'm correct.
I believe so. Yeah. So to me, it's like, I do think time will fix this if we can actually have competition on the market and not just another Novo drug, another Lilly drug. And it's probably going to take more than one other competitor. It's going to take, 4 or 5 viable medications that are roughly in the same ballpark for us to see prices come down.
Yeah. And there are a lot of companies that are looking to get into that game. If Lilly acquires, and I don't know that they will, they raised a bunch of like $8 billion. Some think it's just to pay down their debt. I don't know I don't know how all that works, but I know that pharmaceutical companies typically don't, just pull $8 billion out to do nothing. Like they're going to do something. If they acquired Viking, I think that's a worst case scenario, because the Viking Therapeutics their GLP GIP, I think will actually, once the trial data all comes out in the wash, I think it will rival retatrutide for weight loss. And if you look at some of the muscle wasting that comes with retatrutide and some of these future medications, because the weight loss is so rapid, it seems like GIP GLP combos may do a better job at muscle preservation, even when not combined with other therapies, compared to some other things like semaglutide. But whole nother conversation. But your point's duly noted. I mean, it's if these little companies like Metsera or Viking Therapeutics, some of these preclinical companies get bought up, then the duopoly remains and it doesn't get better. And so that's why we have to hope that, if and when they're bought out, they're bought by Amgen, or they're bought by Pfizer, or they're bought by, another player in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Pfizer, get in here.
Yeah.
Buy some stuff. Let's go.
Seriously. We need some competition. And I think that's where, when I first got into this, I didn't know what to make of all this compound, gray market. I feel like right now it's interesting, because I think what I ultimately came to is like the battle between the compounders and the pharmaceutical companies is going to force a reckoning in our healthcare system, because this drug is too big. Too many people stand to benefit. Our whole country stands to benefit too much for us to get mired in the broken system. Like, I think it's going to force a reckoning in the system, which I think is a great thing. And I think, flip side, I think what's happening now is the gray market is doing the same thing to compounding, in a way, because so many people moved like over to that gray market when they thought compounds were going to go away. Now they're hooked on, $50 a month retatrutide. How does that affect the compounders? I don't know.
I mean, I think there will always be a market for people who want a doctor involved, period.
For sure.
That will always exist.
Or insurance. I mean, the same could be said for branded, right? There's always going to be a market for the branded. There's always going to be a market for the compounded for its own reasons. I just think it's interesting how the way this is all playing out is just fascinating to watch.
We are truly seeing history being made. And I agree with you. I think that GLP-1s are a nonpartisan issue in politics, right? Like, people on both sides of the aisle, we all kind of agree our healthcare is broken. And I think that this could be the wedge that changes healthcare for everyone for the better, if we can all unite behind it. And I've seen people get politically activated around access to their GLP-1s that have never really been politically activated before. So I'm optimistic that it can lead to something better for all of us in the long term.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think where people get hung up is like the how it happens. I mean, that's kind of how everything is. I feel like you talk to just about anybody from any end of the political spectrum, as long as you don't have like completely ideological people. And most of us agree that certain things are broken and need to be fixed. It's the how we get there. But I think the healthcare system is so broken. One of the things, Sabina, that I always go back to is, I think a real big learning moment for me as a content creator, news guy, whatever, in just the broader healthcare space was when the CEO of United Health Group was murdered. And what was so eye-opening to me, Sabina, was watching the internet react to that. because it was met with sort of two schools of thought, and neither of them matched my own, really. The first school of thought was he had it coming. And I couldn't believe that there were people that actually thought that. That was eye-opening enough for me. But the more eye-opening thing for me, because there's always crazies who, there's always crazies on the internet. But it seemed like even the more rational people in the conversation were like, I don't agree with it, but I get it. And they could it wasn't that they were condoning it. It was like they could understand it, because if you've dealt with the healthcare system on any chronic disease, you can start to understand where people start to get radicalized on this. And I'm not personally condoning it. I think the taking of human life is a morally detestable thing, in all angles. Like, this was somebody's dad, this was somebody's husband, somebody's neighbor, somebody's son. But I think that GLP-1s affect so many people that if you haven't lived with a chronic disease that has required expensive drugs before, you've just never experienced the system. And so many people are experiencing the system in that negative way that I think it will force a reckoning in a positive way, for some change that our system has long needed.
Yeah. Well, you talk about radicalizing people. Like, we're very lucky here in the United States that we don't have war here, right? We don't, like, war radicalizes people. But when you look at what impacts a lot of people, if you have a family member who is, say, dying from cancer, and insurance not covering treatment is a factor at play there.
Yeah. Right? I mean, it is
to radicalize someone.
And it often comes down to stories about life or death. I mean, I'm working with a company called Claimable right now, that's sponsoring our podcast, and they work on helping people fight prior authorizations, because over 90% of prior authorizations aren't fought. And it's something that PBMs rely on. They just rely on you not fighting. But the reality is, most oftentimes there's the legal reason why they have to cover it. And if there's not, usually it's a medical reason, and then it becomes a legal reason. And people don't understand that, and they don't fight. But what I've learned through Claimable is that some of these other chronic diseases like cancer, there are stories of people that are going around right now of people that literally, they're like, there's one drug that could save my life. My insurance just denied it. And you start to understand why people become radicalized. This, again, it's not condoning. It's just, that is the sad reality of the situation.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the data of drug research, GLP-1s are the second largest segment of spend on drug research. The one area that's bigger is oncology. And what they do is they make highly specialized, very specific cancer treatments for specific cancers. And then they make them so expensive that insurance fights it. And it's not actually available. For me, when I think about healthcare and my place in healthcare, I think about a spectrum, right? Where we have like really smart scientists making innovation. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, where I'm like, it doesn't matter if you invent something cool if nobody can actually get the treatment, right? The implementation of actually getting the treatment that's so cool and new and amazing, can change lives, is just as important as the science behind what created that treatment.
Which, to bring it all back, is why it is so cool that the judge in this case identified that and called it out, right? Because I don't remember if that's something you said in this interview or if that's something that you said yesterday, but I believe that you said that it was in this interview. You said that she said, the best treatment for somebody is the one that they can get. And so to call that out and identify that as just it shows just somebody who really has given the due diligence that it deserves. And I think anytime one of these cases, whether it's the OFA trial, whether it's these lawsuits that pharma's bringing against telehealth companies, whether it's patent challenges, when this information sits in front of a judge, I think the most we can ask of that person is that they understand the gravity of how many millions of souls their work depends on. And so it just feels good to know that there are judges that are weighing that when they sit down and they read a case, and like a judge like this that sat down and read other cases so she could cross-reference, like, what are they saying here that they're not saying in other cases, which I know is something else that you brought up. The fact that she did that, I think, just makes me feel really good to know that there's people in those positions of power that take seriously what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, compounding being available is in a safe way, to me, is huge for the availability of GLP-1s. And you and I both know, like, these medications have absolutely changed our lives, not just because we're like working in the space now, but just, you know, from taking them, they changed our lives. And there's so much evidence and research that shows, you know, 20%, sometimes more than 20% all-cause mortality reduction for people who use these medications. Like, it's helping people live longer, healthier lives and having longer, healthy years. So to me, it is life and death. And the really interesting thing, when you talk to people who don't like compounding, often they might say safety, but when you actually start having a conversation with them, it's actually about drug patents. And I would love to have a debate about the morality of drug patents when that's the thing that's keeping medications unaffordable. Like, when your insurance doesn't cover oncology, that's on the insurance when they don't cover a cancer treatment, but it's also on the pharma company that prices it at a completely unattainable price for insurance to cover.
100%. The system is still too heavily weighted. Our system in the United States is still too heavily weighted on drug patents. I think you have to have both, because you want the treatments that change lives. But again, you have to find that balance, because what good is a treatment that no one can get? And that's the balance we're trying to strike. And arguably, it should be easier with GLP-1s, because ultimately it affects more people. So it isn't like a rare form of cancer that you're trying to beat that affects a very, 0.0 whatever percentage of the population. This is half of America. Okay. This is, billions of people around the world. Like, this should be pretty easy to figure out, compared to something that affects a very small percentage of the population that there isn't a lot of science around to even know where to begin. Right. That's the part that we have to protect, or we have to figure out how to fund without, developing drugs that cost $1 million. How do we find that balance? I don't know that you or I have the answer to that, but I think what we both are agreeing on, and what we both know to be true, is that the patents on these drugs and the systems that we have seems to be too heavily weighted on protecting that intellectual property. Yeah. Which, again, you could argue it's intellectual to a point, but semaglutide was developed with public dollars in the United States. I mean,
What's interesting is a lot of people. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, oh, no, it's not. Novo Nordisk is a Danish company who purchased the asset of semaglutide, which was developed, as I understand it, like in Boston.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is a lot of people will come into the comments and they'll say stuff like, if Lilly dropped the price of the medication, they would make so much money. And I actually think they would make less money if they drop the price of the medication, right? They'd rather sell it for $1,000 and only serve 10% of the population than sell it for $100 and serve 100% of the population, because it's the same amount of money to them, right? But at the same time, the fact that this medication is so groundbreaking, so many people need it, so many people care about it and have it change their lives, it's actually creating the conditions that are, I think, potentially destroying the moat of drug patents and destroying the moat of pharma has had, because they got too greedy and impacted too many people. We see compounding. Compounding might not go away. Compounding might be here forever. And all future drugs might have to deal with compounding competition because Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk were too greedy in this one situation. And the gray market too. Yeah. Probably will come for other medications, right? All because pharma got too greedy and things hit a breaking point.
Yeah, I mean, this past week, I saw orforglipron pop up on some of the gray market advertisements that come through my feed on Meta platforms primarily, and I thought, wow, so we have a small molecule drug now, not a peptide. I mean, typically that's what these places sell, right? It's peptides, and that's why GLP-1s were such an easy pivot for them. And now you see orforglipron, a small molecule drug. So it's like, yeah, it's obesity now. It's oncology tomorrow. It's, who knows? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds. And I think, to that point, one of the interesting things that I've been musing about lately, a lot of our viewers here at On the Pen are from the United Kingdom. And of course, you have Eli Lilly raising the drug prices over there. A lot of speculation as to why that. I mean, I've done my own speculation on why that is. There's a lot of different schools of thought on why they did that. They were first to market in the UK, and they came in at a lower price and raised the price. That's why some people say most favored nations. I mean, in the United States, Eli Lilly brought Mounjaro to the market with a $25 savings card that anybody could use. So it tracks with their prior history of bringing something to the market, let people get a little taste. It's like the old drug dealer thing, right? It's free today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow it's $500. But it's curious to me because a lot of people in the UK were like, well, yeah, if you get it free through the government sponsored program there, it's free, but not everybody qualifies for that. And it's a very limited number of people who can qualify for that and for the free version. The rest of us are paying out of pocket. Then I immediately go, why don't you guys have compounding? Why is compounding a thing only in the United States? So if I were in the United Kingdom, that's a question that I would definitely be asking is like, where are the compounders in the UK and what can we do to get some competition over here too?
I can't speak on that other than I know people who are working on this problem.
Mm.
So I don't know. I personally don't know any of the laws in the UK. I do not know the legal standing, but I know people are working on this problem in the UK.
I saw you light up a little bit. I sense you know more than you're letting on, but that's cool. That's good to know. And that's encouraging for the folks in the UK who are looking at this going, I could afford it yesterday. I can't now. And then I don't know if you saw this. I'm sure you saw this news, but it kind of broke over the last couple of days while you're traveling that Eli Lilly actually cut off the sales of Mounjaro until the price increase takes effect, so people could not stock up anymore, because that's what people were doing. Their doctors were giving them long prescriptions. They were getting a whole bunch of the medication, so they cut it off. They did announce that they're gonna have some sort of savings program that's going to bring the cost down a little bit. Haven't gotten into the weeds on that, but very, very interesting stuff for sure. I know that you have stuff to do. You've been here for an hour. Is there anything else that you feel like is pertinent to sort of bring to tie this thing up in a bow?
Let me look through my notes.
Your 12 pages of notes.
Okay, so I'll end with a quote from the judge at the end, because she did say some minorly negative things about Mochi. She said, "No one is an angel here. This is all about money." Mm. Like, she doesn't think anyone is actually here for the good. They're all bickering over who gets to take the money from these medications. Mm-hmm. But that said, she basically told Eli Lilly they didn't do their best work and they could amend the case, and she would do an order. She would, rule on a better version of their case. But where it was, it didn't have enough standing. She wasn't satisfied.
So this is the last question that I'll have for you on this. And that is, given everything that the judge said in this hearing, and given the general disposition that Lilly really sort of fumbled this in a really big way, they presented evidence that's not evidence. They didn't substantiate any damages, which is the whole reason you bring a lawsuit, is because there's an injured party. They're not able to demonstrate patients are being injured. They're not able to demonstrate that their bottom line is being injured. Why even give Lilly the chance to amend their case? Why not just reject it out of hand if everything is sort of as you presented it?
Yeah, so this is me. I have to speculate for the judge here because I don't know exactly her thinking. I think she literally read some of their other lawsuits and thought they were better written. So it was almost a slight on whoever wrote the Mochi lawsuit. But I will say another thing that Lilly brought up, they were like, okay, so maybe every single one of these claims alone isn't something, but isn't all of this together add up to customers being misled and misrepresented and us losing customers? And the judge was like, that's not good enough. You can't just say, doesn't this massive confusing marketing confuse customers and therefore it actually leads to harms? Because the standard she was trying to have was Article 3 standard, which is claim by claim. What are the concrete facts behind this claim that's substantiated enough to get into discovery? And then what are the concrete injuries and harms behind the claim? And Lilly wasn't able to produce things. It was just a whole lot of, we don't like Mochi. Mochi's potentially confusing the customer, but they didn't show how they were confusing customers.
Very interesting. Well, Sabina, thank you for taking the time and the money to fly out to cover this thing, because absent you being there, nobody knows about this thing. This is big news all over the internet. I saw it. I saw your LinkedIn post being shared on Twitter today. I saw it was everywhere. So kudos to you for taking the time to cover this. This is a really important access issue, which I know is something that you are deeply, deeply passionate about, something that I very much respect about you, among other things. Thank you for taking the time to come to OTP after your long trip to share this with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun talking to you, even beyond the case, about, philosophically of like what's going on with U.S. healthcare. It was great.
Yeah, I always appreciate the chance to chat with you, Sabina. Thanks for coming, and we'll do it again sometime soon.
Yeah.
At Lollipop, LAWLIEPOP on TikTok, on YouTube, and if you add an S to the end of it, you'll find her on Instagram. Is that correct?
Yeah. And all socials, really.
All socials. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sabina.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina, for that. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, do us a favor, hit the like, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you get notifications for all the information that we drop on this channel, because we're always covering especially issues that impact your accessibility to these medications that are changing people's lives. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do, and we will catch you on the next one.